everybody to the first ever episode of The Captain Spot. I am your host, Justin Freeman, 6'1", 289 pounds of fantasy knowledge. And I couldn't be more excited to be here. I appreciate you guys joining me on this ride as we get started on this podcast. Man, I've brought on the heavy hitters, some of the best and brightest in this business to talk NFL Showdown. That's what we're doing here. A podcast and YouTube channel completely dedicated to Showdown content. And I'm the guy that's going to lead you there. So guys, please welcome Mr. Brian Jester, co-founder of Occupy Fantasy. He's going to be our first guest. This is a guy with major GPP experience in DFS Showdown. He's a millionaire maker winner. He won a Super Bowl contest playing Showdown. So who better to teach us? Who better to take us out on our maiden voyage than Mr. Brian Jester? So without further ado, guys, you don't want to hear from me. You're going to hear from the guys who know. Let's talk to Brian. As promised, we're bringing you the heavy hitters here in Showdown NFL DFS. What better place to start with a millionaire maker himself, Brian Jester. Brian is the head man over at Occupy Fantasy. And Brian, welcome. And before we hop into this Showdown stuff, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your journey through DFS and where you are now at Occupy?
Yeah, what's up, Justin? Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. So I'll try to be brief here, but as recent as 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing just some contract writing about DFS and season-long fantasy for sites like Bleacher Report, Number Fire. And then 3 years ago, I decided to branch out on my own because I've seen a lot of missing pieces in the DFS industry. I've been playing DFS now for, 6 or 7 years. And even to this day, I still don't see dedicated content to helping the casual player navigate the DFS lobbies, navigate bankroll management at a very intimate level, navigate contest selection, and then really talk about, especially for casual players, and even we have a lot of experienced players over at Occupy Fantasy too, how to navigate lineup construction theories. And so that's where I wanted to start, and I felt I could bring something that's missing to the industry. And then had my Bink moment back in 2018. I made a conscious decision at the end of 2018, and because I want to do this full time, always wanted to do this full time. And I said, if I want to make serious money playing DFS, give myself a bankroll to leave my day job to confidently start Occupy Fantasy and do that full time, I need to learn 150 maxing. Like, that's the only way. I have been a profitable player 4 to 5 years and a great supplementary income, but nothing I could leave my day job for. And I said, well, I need to learn how to win the biggest prizes. And the easiest way to do it, not the easiest way, but the most efficient way to do that is 150 maxing. And then literally like a month after I made that decision, I hit the Super Bowl million in the single game showdown. So that worked out instantly. And now that's where we are.
This was Eagles-Patriots Super Bowl, is that right?
This was Patriots-Rams Super Bowl.
Patriots-Rams Super Bowl. Okay,
Yep.
Cool. And so walk me through that moment. Most of us haven't ever had a real sweat going for $1 million, but you have. So walk us through that night and what you're seeing, what's going on. You're at a Super Bowl party, possibly surrounded by friends. How does that all work?
You couldn't have wrote a movie script any better. I was actually in Las Vegas with friends and family. We go out there every year for the Super Bowl. And so we were out there sweating the Super Bowl at a Super Bowl party. Again, surrounded by my friends and family. And I actually had the lead with 6 minutes left in the game. And in Showdown, that's an eternity. Pretty much never want to count anything with 6 minutes left. But I just remember thinking as each play went on, as each play finished, as the ball was turned over, I'm thinking to myself, like, my life could literally change if I can just hold on to this first place.
And you've got 150 going in this contest?
I did. This honestly, it was like the 6th or 7th time I'd ever 150 maxed. So yeah, I had 150 going. My lineup was in first, was unique, which we'll talk about later. And the game ends. They missed a field goal. I finished in first place, and it was just, not just pure happiness that I just won $1 million. Obviously, that was great too. But all the hard work had finally paid off. To be able to celebrate that with my friends and family, you couldn't have asked for a better situation.
So like bottle service that night is what we're talking about?
It was, dude, it was the lamest celebration. I honestly, From the high of being up there, I just crashed after the party, and I went to bed at like 10 or 11 o'clock. Dude, it was not worthy of any
Oh,
discussion.
what a letdown! What
I
a
know.
letdown! But I'm sure you've spent that $1 million well since then, or put it up and invested it smartly. So,
Yeah.
well, congratulations, man! I know that's awesome thing to have happen. I imagine if I had to press you on whether or not that's a realistic expectation for people, and you have your own site and you're preaching bankroll management and you're preaching things like contest selection. That's a pretty unlikely scenario to have happen, correct?
I think that's a fair word to use. Unlikely, yeah, and especially the way the Millionaire contests are structured. It's the biggest bankroll burner for every single player. So yeah, to go in to listen to whatever we're about to talk about and think, well, now I'm going to go win $1 million in Showdown. I mean, probably a once in a lifetime occurrence. But that's not to say you can't make good money from Showdown or DFS. Let's temper our expectations a bit.
And ever since that moment, are you continuing to play 150 in the Showdown lobbies or whatever max you can get down?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm still very selective. I was selective before the $1 million hit, but now I'm just selective in the 150 game. I'm only playing the contest with the highest potential ROIs. So I'm looking at the $10 entries with 100K or $10 150 max with 100K up top or something along those lines. Very, very selective. I'm still playing satellites. Satellites were a big helper in getting me to the 150 entries in the $1 million winner. I'm still playing those, obviously just higher buy-in now. And to this day, I still don't play low-risk contests, cash games. It doesn't fit the way I think about DFS. And I know where my edge is, so I'm not going to go try to play in the 5K head-to-heads or the 10K 20-man. Like, it's just not going to happen for me. So I stick to where my edge is.
That's a good point. And for those of you who have like a poker background, if you've ever like gotten knocked out of a tournament, like a very top heavy tournament, and then you're like, dang, I don't really want to go to bed just yet, let me go hit the cash lobby and sit down for a minute. Like, it takes 30 minutes for your mind to adjust to the new format. Like, you don't want to shove every third hand anymore. Like, there's a different strategy. So I would say that's a great piece of advice too, is like making sure that you do understand what are you good at, what are your strengths, like what makes sense in your mind. And for some people, they're like really well suited for optimal lineups and cash games.
Oh, yeah.
And for some people, they're tournament players. So don't try to force yourself into something that you're not. But let's dive into the Showdown contest format. Obviously, you're still playing with a lot of volume there. Walk me through your thought process once a new slate's posted to the lobby. Are you looking specifically at DraftKings or playing FanDuel too?
Yeah, I will primarily look at DraftKings first. The Showdown format is just better. It plays better for uniqueness and high-risk contests. But started gathering data on FanDuel as recently as last year. And because they don't have the CSV download capability, there's not a lot of data out there about FanDuel Showdown. So I figured let's collect it myself and see where that takes us. And found some pretty good edges there too. So I started playing that more frequently last year. But I do think DraftKings has a superior Showdown product.
Yeah, and so once that slate comes out, obviously contests are going to start populating the lobby there. Which contests are catching your eye? Obviously, we've talked about MME, but are you doing any single entry or cash?
Very, very rarely. Maybe once or twice per season, I'll look and, I do an article for each Showdown slate at Occupy Fantasy. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a really good low risk night for people. Like, you can really fit in some high floor players. And then my mind will wander and I'll say, damn, maybe I should play some cash contests tonight because I've written about this. It looks so good. And then inevitably it goes poorly every single time. So I know to limit myself to one or two cash slates per year. Most of the time it is just those low dollar 150 max, upper 5 figures, 6-figure first place payouts.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's like just a big principle takeaway from Showdown in general, right? Is like, it's an extremely volatile game. Like and doing the 150 max MME stuff allows you to capture a lot more of those potential alternatives. Now, Grant, we'll talk a little bit about uniqueness here in a little bit and how that plays into it, because, a lot of times we'll see very, very many overlapping lineups. But do you play heavier or smaller intentionally based on your confidence on the slate? I know you said you sit some out completely.
Yeah, and it's the most of the time when I'm sitting out completely, it's on FanDuel. Almost always I'll eventually convince myself there's an edge on DraftKings. And so I'll play the slate. But there are some slates on FanDuel where it's like, wow, it's just so chalky. Or there's no value plays I can play. Lineups aren't working how I need to. And okay, I'll just sit out the slate on FanDuel. But most of the time I'll end up playing DraftKings.
Yeah, and when you pull up that list of players and salaries, where do you go from there? How do you determine whether it's, looks like a chalky slate or, what's just sort of your general approach at that point?
And this sounds simple, but I'll just bring up the lineup screen and start hand building lineups just to see what combinations are possible. All right, if I use this captain, what does the rest of my lineup look like? Okay, this guy's projected really well by everyone in the industry. If I use him, where can I get different? And then I just kind of think to myself, how is the field going to build a lineup? If they do this, what is the majority of people going to do next? And that's on both FanDuel and DraftKings. And then I see, okay, I know how the field's going to approach it. Now I can start thinking about where I can get different.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about projections then, because obviously you can get a pretty good, you can get pretty good quality projections from most anywhere these days. There's lots of places that are putting out really quality stuff on projections, but in the context of a single game, do projections have any value to you whatsoever?
So, I mean, this could be a controversial statement. I don't know. I'm of the belief in DFS that projections really don't matter, and player projections don't matter nearly as much as most people think about it. Like you said, you can go to anywhere these days. You can go to ESPN, you can go to Numberball, you can go to Occupy Fantasy, you can go to Action Network, wherever it may be, and you can get pretty close projections, right? At this day in 2020, most people can come up with pretty accurate projections. So for me, it's really just finding, okay, let's just get some set of projections. I don't care whose it is really. Let's find the projections. But then let's think about two things. Let's think about projected ownership. Who, based on their salaries, based on these projections, what are most people thinking is the optimal plays? And then two, ranges of outcomes. The number one most important thing. Okay, this player is projected for 12 points, but does that mean he scores between 8 and 12 most of the time? Or does he score between 2 and 20 most of the time? I don't even think I did that math right, but you get what I'm saying. So that's really the two things I look at. Just find projections and you'll be good enough to figure out the rest.
Yeah, and do you feel like the sort of average Joe, the cannon fodder that is filling up the the lobby to get all those entries in these large tournaments, are they leaning too heavily on projections? Is that something you're seeing? Like you're seeing a lot of, really chalky lineups and not a ton of contrarian thinking, or you'll see like the one, super low priced guy who has a real bump in expectation because somebody got hurt or something like that. And you're like, well, everybody's going to be on this guy. There's not going to be a lineup that doesn't have him in it. And you're seeing opportunities for leverage.
Right. And again, this is a big issue with cash games nowadays too. Like they're very hard in all sports. Well, at least most major sports, on classic slates and Showdown, because there is such an easy access to projections. Your average player now compared to 7 years ago or 10 years ago when DFS first started, very different level of access now. So the average player can create a pretty reasonably high floor, high expectation cash lineup just based on because all these projections are easy to find. But where the issue lies and where most people go astray is they get to thinking in absolutes. Okay, this guy is projected for 15 points. And there's a very specific example. Tyreek is projected for 15 points. Sammy Watkins is projected for 12 points. Now in most people's minds, Tyreek is outscoring Sammy 100% of the time. When we all know that's not true. But when you're building lineups and you could use Tyreek or Sammy, 90 to 95% of casual players are just going to use Tyreek because he's more expensive and it fits their lineup and he's projected for more. When in reality, there's definitely ranges of outcomes where Sammy outscores him.
That makes so much sense. And are you also playing Sunday main slate as well when you're grinding these showdowns, or are you focusing just on the showdown part?
Actually, I don't play the showdowns on Sunday afternoon. I don't want to sound, like some rich guy. The prize pools to me just aren't worth it. Right?
50,000.
The time investment isn't. The prizes are much bigger on the main slate, so I'll put my effort in there. Whereas the Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night really have big contests. Yeah, the island games, and you get more casual players that way. I'm way more inclined to play those.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're building out these MME runs, like talk me through your decision-making process at that point. Are you using optimizers? Are you doing a lot of this by hand? I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it must be to build 150 by hand. So I imagine you're using some help, but and we're hearing a lot about avoiding duplicates. Like obviously we're trying to get number one, and Showdown is a game that is, there's only so many viable combinations there. So there's naturally going to be a lot of overlap with other lineups, and you don't want to be chopping, 100K first prize with another person, especially if you're a high volume player. So walk me through that, the construction part of that, and the things that you're considering and the tools you're using.
For sure. So if you're just the average player and you're entering one lineup, you'll gladly split 100K two ways, right?
Yeah.
But we're also saying that if you're playing just one lineup, you probably shouldn't be playing the big GPP, because me and Colin Drew and all these other big Showdown players have 150 lineups and the odds are stacked against you. But for us, let's say me playing 150 lineups, that's an absolute disaster if I'm splitting it 20 ways. And with that said, uniqueness is my number one goal. And I don't just mean uniqueness in, 2 or 3 ties. I mean, literally no other person has this lineup. And all my research goes into that. When the slate starts, I break down who had the most unique lineups in the entire field. Where do my uniqueness rank? How many of my lineups were duplicated 5 or less times? What were the most duplicated lineups in the entire field, right? And just so I can get a sense of where I sit, because there's been times where I'll put 150 lineups in and I'll see I'm like 25th out of the 150 maxers in uniqueness. And I'm like, well, I'm not even going to watch this game because I feel like I lost already. Mm-hmm. So Occupy Fantasy, we have a partnership with DFS Magic. It's a lineup builder that I helped create. And, really the thing is, if you can get an optimizer, a lineup builder to help you build 150 lineups, that's available pretty widely. But a lot of the burdens are on the users for those lineups. And, the reason I helped build one is because I think about things so differently. It's like, I want to be able to build lineups how I want to build them. So not to make a sales pitch for that, but
well, it's tough to find tools that allow you to build really creative Showdown lineups with a lot of rules that make sense to you. There's obviously groupings and things like that, but you can end up essentially have to rerun an optimizer multiple times on end in order to be able to get the actual final outcome of 150 that you like.
Right. And not to mention, even with the best optimizer out there, a lot of times you still have to go in and hand tweak some of these lineups afterwards. It's not just as easy as the mentions on Twitter make it seem, give me 150 lineups, I'll win. Right. Yeah. You have to really hand tweak a lot of these lineups. And, for instance, the Super Bowl Millionaire, out of 150 lineups, 350,000 entries, 62% of my lineups were unique. No other person had that lineup. Then this is 2 years ago when Showdown still wasn't as big. And it's a little bit harder to get 60% unique lineups on a Showdown slate now. But if I get into that 30 to 35% range, I'm really happy with my process.
Yeah, for sure. How many people do you see 150 maxing these large contests?
You'll see anywhere, depending on the slate, 20 to 50, somewhere in that range. Obviously, if we get like the opening night Thursday Millionaire Maker, I'm sure we'll see way more than that. But you see a lot of familiar faces, and it's not as many as you would believe.
Now, I hear resistance from people who say 15% rake, like the prospects of making money over this long term have got to be like astronomically small. It's got to be just terrible contest selection. So how do you beat rake and also maintain profitability? I mean, we're talking about potentially months at a time without, extremely profitable slates, enough that'll dig you out of your really bad nights, correct?
Dude, the lows are really low, right? I've come, and just my mindset, I've come to be able to be okay with these long losing streaks. And as long as I'm monitoring the metrics I look at every single week, every single slate, and as long as I'm beating my thresholds there, I'm okay. So I'm looking at my unique percentage. And then, if I get in the top 0.1%, it's really a ball bounce one way or the other, whether or not I finish first or not. So looking at top 0.1% finishes. So if we use a concrete example from last NFL season, I played 64 NFL Showdown slates. 4 out of the 64, I finished in the top 0.1% with a unique lineup. Now, there was a half point away from 350K. There was another 0.2 points away from 150K. And because I didn't get those half points, I ended up with a losing season in Showdown. But my uniqueness was great. My top 0.1% finishes were great. 1 out of every 16 slates, a top 0.1% finish. I know over the long haul, I'm going to be profitable doing that, even though it looks like I've lost, and I have, 20, 25, 30 slates in a row. That's going to happen at high risk. So for people who aren't 150 maxing, right, you can't be playing these large contests. The number one contest that people should be playing, and no one, I really don't see anyone talk about this, but if you're a casual player listening to this, on FanDuel, they're called 100 player leagues. On DraftKings, they're literally just called contests. It's like $3 contest, $9 contest. They have the best ROIs possible for you, and you can enter the maximum number. It's only 3 max or 5 max, whatever it is. So if you're thinking about, I don't want to lose that much, to start playing those contests and building your bankroll that way. I mean, that is the number one piece of advice I can give, not just for DFS, but for Showdown too.
Yeah, we preach that in Number Ball as well. Like, keep your contest sizes at 100 or less if you can help it. Like, that's just how you can grow your bankroll. Now, I'm as guilty as anybody when you see the Millie Maker roll out to the live. You're like, man, we gotta click the button and get one out there. You can't sit on the sideline for this. But I mean, just understand the fact that you are. I mean, I hate to say you're not going to win, but you're not going to win. It's just overwhelmingly unlikely that you win. And I understand the allure of a lottery ticket, but if you're just entering one into a 150 max contest, you're drawing dead already. But
I mean, just think about it. Like, okay, let's say there's 100,000 people in a contest. I enter one lineup. I have a 1 in 100,000 chance. That already seems insane to be able to think I can beat 99,999 people. Now add in the fact that there are professionals who do this for a living, having 150 times more lineups than I do, 150 more swings at top prize, and there are 50 of them doing it. Like, it's pure insanity to think that you can beat that. So you really got, if you can't enter the maximum amount of lineups in a contest, you really shouldn't be playing it.
For sure. That's a good rule in general. If you can't max enter, then you shouldn't enter the contest. I think that's a great rule for bankroll management in general. Find you a single entry lobby out there somewhere and enter one in that if that's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. But do you ever consider, taking extreme strategies, possibly as a way for differentiation? Like, I really love Raheem Mostert in this game, and I'm going to lock him into the captain. And I'm going to build 150 variations off of that. Or I really like, the Jags defense this week, and there's no way, I want just to be all in on this. Is there ever a situation that you're actually lock buttoning in your 150 builds?
Normally, no. And I understand the concept there. And I do know some very profitable Showdown players who do that. And I get it. You want to take a stand. If that guy hits, you really want to have 150 chance or however many lineups you have at getting the optimal, right? And I certainly get that. On DraftKings, I won't do it just because I'm mostly trying to get as many uniques as possible, and I don't think that's the best way to do that. On FanDuel, there will be chances and scenarios where I'll do that in my captain spot. And like 99% of the time, it's when Lamar Jackson's on the slate. And I'll just, because you're not going to fade him in captain, so just put him 100% MVP and just try to get unique elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's an important part that we'll talk about a little bit later. The difference between the captain spot on DraftKings. Matter of fact, let's talk about it right now. The difference between the captain spot on DraftKings and the MVP spot on FanDuel. Obviously, there's no salary differentiation on the FanDuel side. So there's basically no incentive other than uniqueness for not playing the person who you think is going to do the best, relative to salary right there in that spot. So walk me through your thought process, how I build a DraftKings lineup, how I build a FanDuel lineup.
Sure. Yeah, no, all really good points, especially on FanDuel. I'll start there. In addition to the lack of a salary multiplier, the half point PPR scoring affects it too. On DraftKings, you can get a guy, I don't know, maybe Julian Edelman wins you $1 million and gets a bunch of catches. I don't know. I've heard that's happened to someone. So so you rack up a bunch of catches and then you can all of a sudden become an optimal captain. You get the 100-yard bonus, right? A lot easier over on DraftKings. And then not to mention when you have the salary included, you can fit more high dollar players in your flex spots if you use a cheaper high upside captain. So on FanDuel, when I'm looking at, okay, what are the likelihood that these quarterbacks are going to be the highest scorers? Who could possibly overtake them in a touchdown heavy scoring system? What happens? Okay. I'll pick normally FanDuel. I'll use both quarterbacks and maybe one or two other guys who I think can outscore them. If I use the quarterbacks, okay, who are some cheap guys I can use that help save salary? Who are some under-owned guys? It's really all about salary usage once you get the quarterbacks in the MVP spot. Once you get running backs or receivers to MVP on FanDuel, salary becomes a lot less important for uniqueness. Now in DraftKings, very rarely will I ever use a quarterback. Although the field got sharper last year as far as quarterback usage in the captain spot, it's still 10 to 15% most slates for each player. And then we see Lamar and Patrick Mahomes approach 30% or more roster percentages at captain and Showdown. And even then, I just won't use them. I can find higher upside guys, more unique lineups by not using those players. The only time I'll use a quarterback captain is if the quarterback really sucks and he's like 4% projected ownership captain. I was like, well, I have some leverage here. And then inevitably every single time they suck and it never works out. But that's how you have to think of it. You just have to think about what they're capable of doing versus what their projected ownership is.
Yeah, and a lot of times for the quarterback position specifically, like if the quarterback has a really good game, especially on DraftKings, it's the wide receivers or some pass catcher on his team is like very likely to have a game in excess of the quarterback's score. You know, if that wide receiver gets there on a great game by the quarterback, by also eclipsing 100 yards and has at least one touchdown, then it's very, very possible that they do outscore the quarterback on that. Just to give the viewers here a little bit of synopsis, I was just sort of researching this. I'll pull it up real quick. Quarterbacks on DraftKings in the winning lineup, quarterbacks were at captain 21.3% of the time, which was a little bit higher than I would have anticipated. The highest is running backs at 32.6%, wide receivers at 29.1%. Occasionally you'll get a defense at 8.5%, tight end 7.1%, a kicker 1.4%. I have a really bad habit of recommending a kicker captain every once in a while. There was a Chris Boswell slate, and Jeff won't let me forget it, but I recommended everything else just fit so perfectly once you threw Boswell into the captain spot. So I'm just going to eat that L every time. But I'll notice that out of 2 out of 134 DraftKings slates last year had a kicker in the winning captain spot. On MVP, for example, on FanDuel, by comparison, quarterbacks were in the winning MVP slot 41% of the time. So obviously a big difference. Running backs 36.6%, wide receiver 17.9%, tight end 3.7%, and kicker just once at 0.7%. So big difference between those two formats. You're certainly incentivized to use that quarterback over on FanDuel. And obviously it has some impacts on uniqueness, which I know is a big thing that's important to you. So are you doing any other sort of strategies to keep things unique? I mean, I know a lot of players will just purposely keep their cash spend down and some things like that to keep lineups unique, because not many casual players feel very comfortable leaving $4,000 on the table.
No, you made a lot of good points there. So just drawing back to the quarterback captain / MVP spot. So 21% optimal lineup on DraftKings, a quarterback captain, but consider that the combined ownership of quarterbacks is way higher than 21%.
Yeah.
So how I look at DraftKings GPPs and like how all my research is developed is what is the field doing versus what is most likely to happen. And when we get those deltas between what people are doing and what's actually optimal, that's where you find the leverage in your lineup construction. So that's a great point there. And then 2, salary usage. Like you said, I always have a saying, if you're making a GPP lineup, a high risk lineup, and you like it, then it's a bad lineup, right? You should never feel comfortable with your high risk lineup. Like the Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill example earlier. If I can play Tyreek Hill, why the hell would I leave $1,000 or $2,000 left over and play Sammy Watkins instead in a normal environment? But for me, I'm very aggressive with salary usage. My Super Bowl 150 that I won the million, I think my lowest salary left $7,500 left over. The winning lineup had $2,200 left over. And maybe that's extreme. $7,500 is probably pretty extreme. But again, I'm playing for end of range outcomes, right? When a game goes 40 points under the total, you can be damn sure I probably have a shot to take down that showdown slate. Now, if it's a 60-point total and it's the Chiefs Rams from a few Monday nights ago and they put up 70 points, I'm probably not going to be in contention. But if the game has any sort of chaotic element, I'm probably going to be in contention.
That makes so much sense. And, it seems pretty obvious that like the more options that exist on slate, the more choices, then the more advantageous things are for like a skilled cash game player. more choices, more opportunity to showcase that you're a better player than the other guy, right? So, but single game slates, they kind of wipe all that clean. And you add on to that there's not 9 roster spots. There's 5 or 6, depending on which site that you're playing on. So, with something as volatile as Showdown, can you actually grind out a consistent ROI playing different contests? Like, I know you're not a cash game player, but can you make money playing cash on Showdown?
Yeah, you definitely can. And again, it comes down to the point where the access to good projections has gotten a lot better, right? And if you just go play the big field double ups, you're gonna have a pretty tough time grinding out ROIs. And part of the approach we preach at Occupy Fantasy is not only just contest selection, but then looking at the opponents. Like, it takes a long time to optimally choose contests. You have to grind through the lobby, look who's playing each contest, and believe me, you can find some really bad Showdown lineups by finding head-to-heads, 3-mans, 10-mans, because your average double up and 50-50, the lineup's gonna be pretty decent. But believe me, I've seen, at least our staff and our members who play low risk contests will send me screenshots like, what the hell is this guy doing, my opponent? And you'll see guys putting kickers and captain, not to call you out.
Just one time, man. Never again.
But you'll see, like, they won't put a quarterback, a captain on it, or MVP on FanDuel. They won't use a 20 to 25 touch running back. There's an obvious value play. They won't use them. They'll use 2 defenses or something. Like, there's all kinds of scenarios. So it's really about finding the right opponents. And in reality, you should be spending more time picking your contest than you do creating your lineups. Because if you have projections, you have a site you subscribe to, you have your own process, you can make a Showdown lineup literally in like a minute. That makes sense.
So if you wanted to be a cash game player, would you start by going and plucking off 3-mans with guys without experience badges, or like, is that the ticket?
Yeah, 1,000%. Yep. Just I would go in, and I know people have day jobs and maybe they can't do this, but if people are working more often from home now, maybe they can. But let's say the Showdown slate starts Thursday night. Okay, the slate opens up late Sunday night, early Monday morning. All right, I'm gonna block off 5 minutes of my time 5 to 10 times per day. Let's just go through the lobby and let's see, oh shit, this one guy has there's a head-to-head and he has no experience badge and it's $5. Boom, let me take that. 2 days later, I find a couple 3-mans with inexperienced players or guys who I've never heard of before. Boom, I'll get in there. And maybe you only end up with 3 or 4 for the week. But those 3 or 4 are going to be a lot more ROI friendly than if you're just playing the big double ups or just random head-to-heads.
And so I would assume then that you would not feel comfortable posting in the head-to-head lobby. You'd feel more comfortable plucking off action.
I'm sure the very high stakes professionals would love for me to post head-to-heads. I won't be doing it. And unless you can just severely limit who takes your head-to-heads, it's not the best way to do it. And I know a lot of people are going to say, be confident in your lineups. But again, we don't have to make this hard on ourselves. We can make DFS a lot easier than it already is. So.
Yeah, and doing just that can impact your ROI pretty significantly, because you're going to get plucked off by players better than you. I mean, speaking to the public at large. So, definitely go out and find your own games that way. I think that's an edge that not many people talk about. And that edge is not there. It's not consistent in playing a large field 50-50 or double up. It's a different environment altogether, because you're gonna get a sort of average, a consensus cash line in that thing. And sure, there's going to be some weak lineups in there, but it's not going to impact your ROI the same way that, playing that weak lineup in a head-to-head would do. And, I used to think that there was no such thing as like fish at high stakes. I didn't think that existed, but I was like, who's going to post up at $1,000 and take on somebody? Like, you'd have to be, Richie Rich or blank check or whatever to be able to just post up at $1,000 and not have researched a lineup. But the more I look at that's not true at all. Like, money is such a relative thing to different people. Like, what's $10 to me might be $100 to you, and vice versa. So you never know. There's not necessarily a true linear relationship between stakes and sharpness. So, whatever you feel confident getting down, I'm sure at the $50 level, you can still find some people with, really bad lineups.
And here's the best part about DraftKings, right? You don't even have to play these people to see what their lineups are. Once the slate starts, you just go back to the lobby, you click the view live contest link. You can see every single contest that's posted. And this should be part of your process too. Go in. A lot of people point out Empire Maker, right? post, hundreds of thousands of dollars per slate, you can literally see what his lineups look like and learn from them every single slate without ever having to play him. So let's say you're a 25, let's say your bankroll says you should be playing $25 head-to-heads, right? Go in the lobby, and you'll start to see who's posting $25 head-to-heads pretty frequently. All right, every slate, let's say player X posts $25 head-to-heads every time. All right, is he good? I don't know. But before I risk my money, let's look at a couple slates, the slate locks. I go in, I see his lineup. Okay, this is a pretty bad lineup. Let's check again next week. Okay, this dude posted another pretty bad lineup. Maybe I should start taking his head-to-heads. So you can do a lot of the grunt work up front without even laying a dollar down to figure out who your opponent should be.
Yeah, and determining whether he played a good or bad lineup can be an interesting, thing, because you don't want to just look at the results. You want to look at like just the general thought process that got him to that, because that's the thing that's repetitive. You're like, oh gosh, he doesn't even understand like how to optimize around this. Like he's playing a GPP lineup in a cash contest, or something like that. So yeah, definitely wanting to look at that stuff. We talked a little bit about your thoughts on captain and MVP and what goes into that decisions, but are there positions that you like try to shoehorn in there, or do you just like love throwing a tight end in the captain or anything like that? Or are you drawn towards some positions more than others?
Not necessarily. It'll depend on the projected game scripts, projected ownership, but it's really running backs and receivers that get the most love from me. Even on FanDuel, I'll go a little bit more running back heavy in MVP. DraftKings a little more wide receiver heavy on MVP, and that should be pretty obvious because of the scoring systems.
And obviously the slates are a little bit smaller on some of these other contests, but both FanDuel and DraftKings they're now playing like, I don't know, 8 slates a week or something like that on Showdown. Like you can get 3 1:00 games on each side and 2 or 3 4:00 games. And then obviously all the island games, depending on sort of how the schedule works out. But I know you're more comfortable with sort of the bigger prize up top, but how can a player take advantage of some of these afternoon contests? Do you think there's an edge there, or do you think the field's sharper at some of the like less primetime-y type of games?
I do think the field is sharper. You'll most of the time just see the professionals and some of the high dollar players just playing these every single slate type of things. But again, it comes down to your comfortability, your awareness of your results. Let's just say you're not a good classic NFL player, right? Your lineup, you're not profitable. You don't make good lineups, but you're pretty good at Showdown. Okay, let's just start looking at the Showdown slates each week. And okay, Thursdays, it's kind of okay. There's 2 1:00 games. I don't really like how the lineups work, but there's 1 1:00 game where I think I have a really good edge in GPPs. I can really make a solid cash game lineup. All right, let's start playing that. No one says you have to play the main slate, right? Like a dollar made on Showdown is the same as a dollar made on main, is the same as a dollar made in League of Legends. It doesn't matter what it is. If you make dollars, you're making dollars. So I wouldn't try to shoehorn yourself into only playing a certain type of slate. Just keep an open mind. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, I think one thing that's appealing to me about playing every single Showdown slate that's available is realizing a true ROI over the course of a season. Like, because I mean, if you're swinging at those top prizes, you got what, 17? Well, I guess really a couple times a week, you got maybe 30, 50 chances at taking down a big prize to neutralize and overcome the losses that you've had for the year. And you can have a full losing season and be a great player. Like that's possible. But possibly you can mitigate that by playing more and more slates. Now, obviously the prize structures are very different. So just because you won the 1:00, Titans Jags game,
right.
it probably just covers your entry fees for the next 3 slates or something like that. But it's not nothing. And you probably didn't have to 150 max. A lot of those are more like 53 max or something like that, to be able to max enter those tournaments. But what do you think about just, it's just law of large numbers, right? The more you play, the more of a true ROI you're going to understand how good of a player are you at those slates.
Yeah, 100%. You realize your true ROI a lot quicker, and if you think you have an edge, it's compounding interest, right? The more money you can get into these slates where you think you have an edge, the more you should be playing. So, and a lot of this particular session and what we talked about, for the last 30 minutes or so, really ties back into record keeping and looking at your play and where you're good. Like all the top players I know, all the profitable players I know really keep intricate records and look at where they excel. And even if you're playing $1 head to head, you should still be keeping track of how you do, because you need to know where to put your money. If you look, a lot of people will be surprised if they had accurate records and look back over the past year. Wow, I lost 20% in head-to-heads in MLB. I thought I was a really good MLB player. Or, wow, I never thought about playing more 20-mans, but I had a 20% ROI in those last year. So being aware of what you're good at, even if it's not what you think you're good at, is incredibly important.
Yeah, for sure. All of that and tracking results, you can't overrate that at all. That's a very, very important part of just playing DFS in general is learning where your skills lie. So talk us through a little bit. I didn't ask you about this beforehand, but talk through us a little bit about, you have a losing night. You know, things didn't go your way. You certainly didn't win, but are you having nights where you're losing all 150? So obviously you've got $1,500 out there if you're playing the $10 150 max. So are you losing $1,500 on that night, or more than likely you're min cashing a few? Maybe you had one that just went on a heater and finished in 18th place and still cashed out really well. But so what does a losing night look like? You know, what's kind of the range of outcomes there?
Well, I have plenty of examples to draw from. So, so for me, because I'm more based on uniqueness, I'm not okay with a 10 or 100 way tie for Showdown. Naturally, my approach is way more high risk. I understand a lot of people don't have the stomach to play that high risk. So for me, this is going to sound crazy. I know you just listened to me talk about all the strategy and you're going to say, why am I even listening to this guy? But I legit lose like 90% of DFS slates. And that's not even an exaggeration.
Subscribe to Occupy Fantasy where you'll learn.
And you too can lose 9 out of every 10 slates. Yeah. For me personally, because I play so high risk and, you know, a min cash and GPP isn't what I'm aiming for. Honestly, 80 to 90% of slates I'm losing. And that may range from, you know, getting $100 or $200 back on my $1,500 investment, or maybe it's only losing a couple $100. But really it's lose, massive win, lose. And honestly, my cycle, because, you know, we should talk about the mental aspect of this. For me, it's more like, okay, I hit big. I now think I'm the greatest player in the world. No one's better than me. And then I lose. I'm like, this is dumb variance. I can't believe this. Then it gets to the point, it's like, okay, now it's 20 losses in a row. Am I even good at DFS anymore? What is going on? And then I hit a big win. I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm the best that's ever lived. And it's that cycle for eternity. Yeah. So being able to just, you know, take a step back and realize what should be happening, what possible outcomes there are, is still incredibly important.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is like every loss just gets me that much closer to the next win, and every win just means like, okay, I'm staring down the barrel of 20 or 30 losing slates. But like, so on a given losing slate, are you like, how much of your 1,500 are you getting back in prizes? Like zero? Or do you have zero nights?
Very rarely zero. You know, most of the time my floor is like 10 to 20% return of my investment. So if I risk 1,500, I'll get back 150 to 300 is a floor. On average, it's like a 40 to 50% return. So I risk 1,500 back, I'll get 750 back. Very rarely will I fall in the range of breaking even. And then it's the really big wins. That's really what it comes down to.
And how often are you having like moderately profitable nights? Like you made $800? Rarely.
Yeah, like 5% of the time, maybe. Yeah, just because of the top heavy nature of these contests, right? Like this is what I'm signing up for. Like me getting 5th isn't going to do a lot. I have to get first, or my strategy, my personal strategy is not going to work.
For sure. Now, have you experimented with in-game Showdown at all? Like I'm fascinated right this second with in-game Showdown. I want to be the in-game Showdown guy. You see heavy Chevy JF in the lobby, you turn around and run because you don't want my action. So like, and that's exploded. That started, I think, not this past Super Bowl, but the one before. They started with second half and then fourth quarter Showdown contests. Both sites have this now, and the prizes are growing. Obviously, Showdown becoming super, super popular. The in-game Showdown is growing too, because what happens is you enter all these dead lineups at 8:30, and then by 9 o'clock you realize, oh man, I'm toast. I didn't have Marquez Valdez-Scantling who just caught that touchdown, and I have no chance. And so you head over to the second half lobby and you enter 3 more contests and it costs you $60 and you're like, okay, let's do this. This is the time, one time. So are you doing any of this Showdown? Like, I think the action's got to be super soft because everybody's just watching Monday Night Football, keying it on their phone, after 4 or 5 beers. Like, I like that. That sounds good to me. I want to be playing against those guys, and you can get a large number of max enters. Like you can 50 max some of these. So if you've been doing your homework and you've got a laptop up, I can do my Dave Gettleman here, but if you've got that ready to go and your lineups are ready to go because you know the salaries ahead of time, then you can have a really massive edge. And if you understand sort of how second halves and how fourth quarters work, I really like that. I think that's really enticing.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I personally don't play. Again, it comes down to just the time investment thing for me, but there's a massive edge for it. And really Showdown in general, and now just even more explicitly second half and fourth quarter is perfect for the casual fan. I mean, that's why DraftKings and FanDuel made these, that they want to appeal to the more casual player. And instead of having to do research for an entire slate, I only have to look at one game. Wow, I already watched one half of this game. I know what's going to happen in the second half. Now I can jump into a second half. So it makes a ton of sense from the site's perspective. And because of that, like you said, you do get a lot of casual players playing. So really it comes down to knowing the projected game script for the second half. And I don't know if we'll ever see these slates again. Fingers crossed we do. But preseason, especially in the Pro Bowl, this is like a very degenerate statement. But if you play in-game Pro Bowl or preseason, the edge is through the roof. Just knowing the actual playing time, because you'll get guys making lineups who have guys who have no chance of seeing the field in the third and fourth quarter, whether it's Pro Bowl or preseason. And I mean, you can make an entire season's worth of bankroll in those types of contests.
I have to keep an eye on that. I never considered that angle. So yeah, I'll definitely look at that. But how would you describe the strength of the field in general for Showdown? Like, is it sharp players, recreational players? Is it there? I'm assuming you feel like there's enough recreational players where the sharp players are not just all battling each other.
No, and I mean, I'm not going to name any names here, but like even the sharp players aren't that good. Like
some of them are playing kickers in the captain spot.
Yeah, I don't know who would do that, but there are some out there that do that. But honestly, I mean, some like literally top pros that you go to the Roto Grinders rankings, you see. I mean, some of these guys have embarrassingly bad uniqueness percentages, lineup constructions in Showdown. So for me, that's encouraging. It's like, wow, the edge is still there. The casual fan has gotten a little bit better. There's a lot more Showdown content out there, a lot more tools out there to use, but the edge still remains. When my uniqueness percentage remained relatively consistent throughout 2019, I'm still thinking, wow, okay, I still have an edge. Now I'm going to monitor that this year. But again, I still think it comes down to the question. Like most people aren't comfortable leaving a ton of salary, aren't comfortable thinking about these chaotic situations, wide ranges of outcomes. So I think in general, it's always going to be there. But the fact that pros really haven't caught on as much is what leads me to believe that the edge is going to remain for a while.
Do you do anything other, like, do you ever leave zero salary on the table? Do you ever spend all the money, but you're like, well, it's going to be unique because, I mean, nobody's playing this third string tight end, but if he catches the touchdown at the 1 yard line, like, he's in there or something like that.
No, because even if you think that and it happens, it's still duped somehow. I don't know who else is thinking that way, but it happens. No, I have a very strict salary ceiling. I'm never going to get close to the 50K or 35K, whatever is on FanDuel. So
that makes sense. Well, Brian, this has been awesome. I appreciate you giving us a peek behind the curtain into your process. Tell us all, where you're at and what you're working on and anything else you want to plug.
For sure. Yeah. So occupyfantasy.com. If you liked a lot of the stuff I talked about today, the way I think about DFS, the first thing I did when I started Occupy Fantasy was writing a DFS ebook. It's 19 chapters, and it lays out all these fundamentals, contest selection, bankroll management, lineup strategies that the industry just doesn't think about. And I lay all that out in the ebook. It's called The Ultimate Guide, occupyfantasy.com. Go check that out. Like I said, if you liked what I talked about today, you'll love that. And I'm actually in the process, I need to actually sit down and do it, but finishing an NFL Showdown guide. Talks about percentages from last year, lineup constructions, uniqueness, contest to target, things like that. Aiming to have that out before the first slate of the NFL season. And again, Occupy Fantasy, whether it's at Occupy Fantasy on Twitter, occupyfantasy.com, you can be notified when that's available.
Very cool. Sounds very familiar, man. Well, I appreciate you joining us. And Everybody follow Brian on Twitter at BrianJesterFF. Thanks for the time, Brian. We'll check you out here soon.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thank you.
Would I lie to you? I told you Brian Jester knows his stuff when it comes to GPP showdowns. Many shout outs to Brian and Occupy Fantasy. Really appreciate what he's putting out there into the content world. I hope you guys have enjoyed talking about DFS Showdown. Like, it's a really interesting topic to me. I think there's a lot of uncharted territory, so to speak, a lot of ground that we can cover. And couldn't ask for a better second guest. I've got Michael Leone coming on the show tomorrow. He and I are going to talk simulations and game theory. It's going to be some really cool nerding out between the two of us. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll subscribe. There's a number of different places you can subscribe. You can do that on your podcast feed. Be sure to give us 5 stars and give us a review. That's how we're going to climb and reach more people, and I would personally really appreciate that. It takes a lot of time to do this, so appreciate the 5-star ratings. Also visit us over on YouTube. You can search for the Captain Spot, and be sure to subscribe there. You'll get notifications when we go live. I'm planning some in-game showdown contest live broadcasts, so we can be going over our second half lineups together. And if you want to be notified when those are coming, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you're confused about where to find all this stuff, go to captainspot.com, cptspot.com. And there you'll find out everything you need to know for the show, where to access it, where to get the podcast feed, where to go on YouTube. Everything you need right there in one spot. We also got some really cool offers up there. We've got I've got a special project I'm working on right now. I wanted to bring you guys in on. I'm in the middle of an ebook, and I'm kind of telling you right now so that I'll actually finish this thing and create some accountability for myself. So I'm about halfway there. I've got about another solid week of writing, but all the research is in the barn at this point. So really excited to release that here soon, so I'll have more information on that. But I've got some great offers at Prize Picks, Monkey Knife Fight, Thrive Fantasy over on the website, captainspot.com. Go there, check it out, and you'll see some of the cool offers that we've got there. And stay tuned for more information on the book. It's going to be like the ultimate guide for playing Showdown DFS. And some of these interviews I'm doing are greatly helping with that. So appreciate Brian once again, and stay tuned tomorrow where we'll have on Mike Leone. Appreciate it, guys. See ya.